everyone, it's Alice, and today we're gonna talk about some controversial bookish opinions. I just thought this could be kind of fun and a little silly because I know some people have really strong opinions about certain things when it comes to books and like the book community and book reviews and things like that, and I just think it's fun to talk about. I don't necessarily have that many strong opinions about like what other people do or anything like that, and I just thought it could be fun to like read some of yours. So I asked you on Instagram what your controversial bookish opinions were, and we're just gonna go through them and maybe see if I agree. Maybe I really disagree. I don't really know. Now before we start, of course, I have to do a little disclaimer. This video is just for fun. It's not that serious. I don't think any of these opinions are really that serious anyway, and it's just interesting because some people have really passionate ideas about certain things and some people don't care at all, and I just think it's a little funny. So we're gonna go through these and we'll see. I'd also love to know if any of you like really agree or really disagree with any of these. Tell me in the comments, because I'm sure some of you don't agree with me at all about a lot of things. The good thing about this space though is that we can all have different opinions and we can all coexist and get along, and it's all good, hopefully. Maybe one of these or some of these are like really crazy, but I don't think so. I think most people are just, it's all good. We're gonna start with a funny one that really made me chuckle to sort of set the tone for this video. It says, "You're gonna hate this one, but Dan Brown books are trash." I, as you may know, disagree, although maybe not entirely. I kind of get why people say this, because I don't think that the books by Dan Brown are like literary masterpieces, but I do think they're a lot of fun. So I think it depends on what kind of mindset you're going into it with, because I go into those books thinking I'm gonna have like a fun adult adventure book with like some secret societies and some history, and I know that not all of it is real, if that makes sense, and I just think they're really fun and engaging and entertaining. I do think if you're going into them thinking they're very serious books, they are kind of trash, because that's just not what those books are. To be honest though, I do say that I understand why people don't like them, but I don't understand the level of it necessarily. Like, maybe it's just on Reddit where people like absolutely hate Dan Brown, but I think even if you're going into them with a different kind of mindset, they're not the worst books in the world. Like, I have read books that are much worse than that book, and much more like far-reaching and totally crazy, and I don't know, maybe those are the most out there books that you've read, but I don't think they're that bad. Maybe I'm just a fan though. I don't know. The second one is an interesting one, and I want to discuss. It says, "Most people rate books way too generously." And I think this is interesting because I use Goodreads and I rate on a scale from 1 to 5 stars, which is the scale they use on Goodreads. And I sometimes feel like the scale is like skewed with the way that a lot of people rate books, and I sometimes wonder if what I rate a 3 out of 5 stars is like other people's 4 out of 5 stars, because they use the scale differently and it appears more generous. For me, a rating of 3 out of 5 stars is like a rating of a book that I read and enjoyed. And sometimes I do rate books 3 stars and people are like, "Oh, you really didn't like that book." And that's not what a 3 out of 5 star rating is to me. So I do think that people use the scale differently. If it's too generous, I don't know. Maybe sometimes I feel too harsh, where I very rarely give out like 5-star ratings, and maybe I should be more generous. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think though, like how you use a rating system, or if you use one at all. Maybe we should stop using it and just talk about what we liked and what we didn't like. I guess I don't really know if I agree or disagree with this one. Maybe some people do. I don't know if most people do though. I wonder if it's just that people use the scale and interpret it differently. Then someone writes, "How much booktubers and book talkers read sets unrealistic standards for everyday people." I think this is a very interesting one, and It's especially interesting this time of year where it's like the beginning of a new year and people are making reading goals, because I think this like reading goal thing is an interesting thing to talk about. I'm sort of in two minds about this because I can understand the feeling of seeing other people read a lot more than me online, and I like wish that I read more. And sometimes I feel like people set these goals and I'm like, oh my god, it's amazing that you can do that and I can't do that. But I do feel like that's a me issue. Like if they can do it and I can't, it's not their problem. And maybe it leads to some pressure, but I've sort of just tried to get out of the mindset of that and just be like, I read what I read and I try my best. So I do understand the pressure, but I don't know if it sets an unrealistic standard for everyday people, because I think people who have like social media platforms where they read a lot of books, they are also book reviewers. And I think that for like when I review a lot of books, and sort of the purpose of my channel is to be able to tell you what you should read or what I think you should read or what I think is good, and it's to help you pick the right books to read or like good books to read, because you don't necessarily read as much as someone who has an online platform. I gotta be honest, I don't know if I would read as much if I didn't have this channel, because I might be a little bit more chill about it. And I really try to read more because I want to review more books for you, so that it's easier for you to find good books to read if you don't read as much. Is this making any sense? I think what I'm trying to say is that from a social media perspective, I understand the pressure, because there can be pressure about how much you should read as an everyday person because of what you see online. But I think from a book review perspective, it's actually good that people read so much, because that's what, like, that might be one of the reasons you follow them, because they are able to read so much that they can recommend you the very best books. I also do think that some people find these kinds of things inspiring and motivating, like seeing other people read a lot and being a part of a reading and book community. So I think it's different for different people. I hope it doesn't set a horrible standard. So I'm sort of in the middle here. I understand the pressure, but I also understand that, you know, people online who read a lot and have book platforms read a lot for a reason. I don't know. I do understand that it can be difficult to fit in reading in your everyday life though. But yeah, you just have to read as much as you want to, and you kind of have to disregard everyone else. The next one though says, if you forget the books you read, they should be rated 1 star. Oh, this is so funny. I feel like this comment is like coming for me. I am so forgetful, and I forget so many of the books that I've read. Sometimes I will only remember a little bit, and even like some of my favorite books, I can like recommend the book to a friend and they'll be like, what's it about? I have no idea. I just know I loved it. If I were to do this, I would have to rate like 96% of the books that I read 1 star, which just makes me chuckle. But the thing is, with like a lot of books, if they make an impact on me, I don't necessarily remember that much of the plot. I usually remember more characters than plot, but I remember how the book made me feel. Like, that's the thing that I remember. It's like the feeling of it. So I don't necessarily remember the book, I just remember my reaction to the book. So would I have to rate those books 1 star because I don't remember like plot points? I think this is an interesting way of thinking of rating, and at least for me, this would be a huge problem because I am very forgetful. Then I got 2 that are kind of like in the same vein. The first one says, a lot of people online are book hoarders, not readers. And the other one says, I keep my physical TBR over 90% read. I don't get the overconsumption. I think the thing with this is that book collecting and reading are 2 separate hobbies. And I feel like a lot of people do both. But if you only do one, you don't understand the other. So if you only ever, like, you're a reader and you don't care about book collecting, it seems like people like hoard books and they just buy all of these books. Now that I'm talking about it, maybe I'm just making excuses for myself because I have so many books. But I feel like those are like two separate hobbies in a way, and for people who are only readers, they don't really necessarily care about keeping a lot of books. Like one of my best friends, she is a huge reader, like her and her husband, but they don't have a lot of books in their home. Like they don't really seem to care about collecting books, whereas I love collecting books. I love finding like pretty editions. I also just love spending money on books. And for me, that's like a separate joy that is like next to the joy of reading. It's also why I'm okay to a certain extent to get rid of books that I haven't read, because I got enjoyment from just getting the book and having it. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but I just feel like those are two separate things, and I don't know if it's really over consumption. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm just, again, making excuses for myself. I will say though, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of people online are book hoarders and not readers, because I do feel like if you collect books, you do usually read them. Maybe not all of them, but you are usually a reader if you like collecting books. I don't think I've ever come across someone who has a lot of books and don't read at all. It is interesting though, because people are very different when it comes to these kinds of things. But I just think for some people, books are things that are only meant to be read. But for other people, it can also be like a work of art or like a physical, beautiful object that you have because it's a physical, beautiful object. It's interesting though. People are very different when it comes to this. I am obviously a hoarder. Then, of course, we have this one, which says, I honestly feel that listening to audiobooks is not reading. This is one of those things that people have really strong opinions about. Like some people, I don't know if it's just an online thing where people say things to get a reaction, but if people genuinely believe this, I think it's an interesting take. I agree in the sense that reading, like physically reading something on a page, is not the same as listening. But if you're talking about the concept of reading, which is getting a book in your head or getting text in your head, whether you do it through your ears or through your eyes, it doesn't matter. It's the same. I will say though, I do understand that listening to something is sometimes different. Like sometimes you have audiobooks that are like full cast, or you're listening to a memoir and it's read by the author, and that like makes it a little bit different. But just because it's different doesn't mean it's not reading. Whether it's better on audio or worse on audio doesn't really matter, as long as you got the book in your brain. This next one sort of ties into people online reading like a lot of books. It says, I don't trust online book reviews from people who read 200 plus books a year. This is interesting to me. I wonder what makes this person feel this way, because I feel like the more you read, the less likely you are to be impressed. And so if you are impressed by a book, it should be like a really good book. So the more you've read, the more you know in a way, and the more reference points you have, and the more you have to compare things to. And if you then find a really, really good book, it should be like really good because you've read a lot. And I feel like I don't think I feel this way. Like if someone reads a lot, I don't trust their reviews. I don't really understand why you wouldn't. Maybe it's because some people feel like they're then reading the books too fast and they're not like really getting it, or not fully like, I don't know, but some people just read really fast though. Then we have one that I have thought about before. It says, having an unlikable character in a book is not a good reason to give it a bad review / low rating. I sort of agree, but I wonder if that's because I'm a reader who likes unlikable characters. And sometimes I read a book where we have an unlikable character and I feel like the unlikable character is done so well, and then I read someone's review and they don't like it because of the unlikable character, but I feel like the point of the book was to have that person be unlikable. I don't know, but I do also understand that some people just don't get on with the characters that I get on with. I feel like with this, that maybe objectively having an unlikable character that is unlikable on purpose is not a good reason to give something a bad review or a low rating, but subjectively, you are allowed to not like it. And so reviews are mostly subjective. So I don't know about this one. I'd love to know what you think of this, but yeah, I really like books with unlikable characters, so I feel like I wouldn't give a book a bad rating or a bad review because of an unlikable character. It would be because I feel like the unlikable character is not done well. This next one I do feel is a little bit controversial. It says books in translation are pointless. Anything translated loses the original book. I don't agree. I do agree in a sense that you probably do lose something in translation. Like, it's impossible to translate something and keep it completely 100% the way it was originally because it's not the same language. But I don't feel like books in translation are pointless. I feel like that's a crazy thing to say. Maybe it's just because I really like translated books, but I will say I have read books that are not translated well. It was a while ago, but I remember I was reading this crime series when I was growing up, and it was a translated series, and they switched the translator in the middle of the series, and suddenly the books were really bad. But I think it wasn't the book, it was the translation. And in those cases, you did lose something, but I feel like most translators are pretty good at their jobs, and so it's like a good book to read even though it's been translated. The next one again is like about books on social media. It says book talk is the worst place to go for book recs. I don't know. I'm not on TikTok, but I do have TikTok and I like follow book creators there and stuff. I don't necessarily find it a super useful place to get like book recommendations, but I have found it to be like, it's better now than it was in the beginning, and the trick is finding creators who recommend books that you like. It can be a little bit difficult to find different kinds of creators on TikTok, I think, and some of the more popular ones, like a lot of them recommend the same books, and it's not the kinds of books that I like to read. But I have a couple that I follow that actually like have a lot of different books, and they talk about books that a lot of other people aren't talking about, and some of those recommendations are really good and some of those reviews are excellent. There isn't necessarily that much difference between YouTube and TikTok in this way. If you only get like things recommended to you and you don't seek them out, you might not get the recommendations that you want. And I think because YouTube has been around for longer, it's like you know of more people on it. I do think that the algorithm on TikTok though does recommend a lot of the same stuff, which I don't necessarily like, but maybe YouTube does that too. Either way though, I don't think it's the worst place you can go. I'm sure there are much worse places that you can get book recommendations from, like from people who have never read a book in their lives. You might not get great recommendations from those. Then we have one that I agree with now, but if you'd asked me like 5 years ago, I may not have agreed with it as much. It says a book doesn't have to look like you just bought it after you read it. Spine, dog ears, etc. Of course it doesn't. You do with your books whatever you want. Some people really want to keep their books pristine, and so they don't break spines. They don't dog ear, they don't write in their books. And I used to be like that because I wanted to keep my books as perfect as possible. Now, I care less. I am much more like, it's more important to me for like the reading experience to be comfortable. So if it's uncomfortable to not break the spine, I will break the spine. And, you know, it's your book. You can do with it whatever you want. If you want to write in it, if you want to dog ear, whatever. I feel like the best way to go about it, like making the decision of what you do to your book, is like comfort and what it's like to read the book, and not necessarily the aesthetics of it. I think I was much more like into the aesthetics of books before. I mean, I still really care about aesthetics of books, but I didn't like how it looked when you broke a spine, which is why I didn't do it. But now I'm just like, I want to read the book and I want it to be comfortable, so I'll do whatever I want. It doesn't matter what it looks like. Speaking of aesthetics, this next one says rainbow shelves don't look good. It looks childish. Love rainbows, but just no. You know, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. People can do whatever they want. I don't know how I feel about this actually. I don't have rainbow shelves and I've never wanted them because I don't necessarily feel like that's my aesthetic. It's not necessarily like my thing, but I don't necessarily think it looks bad or childish. It's just different from what I want my shelves to look like. That's a very diplomatic answer, I know, maybe a little bit of a cop-out. I guess for me, it depends on how the rainbow shelf is done, because I've seen some that I really like and there's like a rhyme and reason to how it's organized and I think it's really cool. And then I've seen some that I don't like as much or I wouldn't have in my house. But how people organize their books is none of my business because it's not my books and it's not my house. I do think there is something satisfying to like sorting your books by color though, and I do that to a certain extent. Like I have a shelf over there where I have white and green books, and then on this shelf I have brown and black books, which is a way of like sorting things because of aesthetics. The rest of my shelves though are just a mess. They're not even organized well. They're just, I've just put things where they fit. I do think I disagree with the looking childish though. I don't feel like it looks childish necessarily. Then I just want to include this one because it made me laugh. It says, dog earring pages is such a dad move. And I read this and I was like, what do you mean? But you know what? The only person I know in my life who dog ears pages is my dad. So maybe this person is right. Maybe it's like peak dad move. Alright, I think we're gonna round it off. I did get a lot of these, but the last ones that we're gonna do are gonna be about particular books because I think it's interesting. The first one says, I hated The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I found it so boring. This is interesting. It's been a while since I read that book, and I remember I really liked it, but I maybe agree a little bit. I didn't hate it like this person did, but I did find it a little bit boring in parts, and I've found it to be very forgettable. Like, I don't remember that book much at all. And when I read it, I felt like it didn't live up to the hype. I do think maybe it's my favorite book by that author though, but maybe that author is just not really for me. Next, someone says, Little Women sucks. Oh my god, shots fired. I didn't like Little Women. I don't talk about it much, and loads of people recommend that book to me all the time. I read it maybe like 6-7 years ago, and I could barely get through it. Like, I don't understand the thing about that book, and I just wish that I got it, but it just wasn't for me. I would say that it wasn't for me. I wouldn't say that it sucks. I don't think it does necessarily. Like, a lot of people like that book and get a lot from that book, but as a subjective opinion, I can understand a little bit because I also didn't get it. Don't come for me. It just wasn't for me. Second to last, someone writes, 1984 was a chore to get through, and if it was published today, it wouldn't be nearly as impactful. I both agree a little bit and disagree. I totally understand why some people feel like 1984 is a chore to get through, because it is a little bit. Even though I love that book, like, the reason I love it is because it taught me a lot of things that I hadn't necessarily, like, thought about before, and it has a lot of interesting concepts to it. It probably wouldn't be as impactful today because a lot of the stuff that we have today about these issues stem from 1984, which also probably stems from something, but I don't know if it probably wouldn't be as impactful because something else would have come along that was impactful in that time, if that makes sense. But yeah, I still think it's a really good book, and it's a very educational book, and it has a lot of concepts in it that I think are interesting and important, and it teaches you a lot. It can be a little bit of a chore. I also think maybe if it was published today, it would just drown in like the sea of all of these other books. I don't really know. It's interesting though. Lastly, someone writes, most people on social media only read the books that are trending. I keep seeing the same books over and over, I'm assuming this says. I don't really agree. I think the trick with this is that you have to seek out people who are reading different kinds of books. I remember when I started watching BookTube back in the day, I kind of felt this way because a lot of the book content that was really popular were of the same types of books. There were a lot of YA fantasy books, but the thing is, the way to fix that is to seek out other creators who are talking about other kinds of books. And you have to like actively go find it, which is maybe a little bit annoying. But if you do that, you will see that loads of people make content about loads of different kinds of books. So you need to find the right creators. And if you're only seeing the same stuff, the solution to the problem is to find other stuff. I feel like the trick is finding like a couple. So if you're on Instagram, a couple of Bookstagram accounts. If you're on TikTok, a couple of book talk creators. If you're on YouTube, a couple of YouTube channels. If you find a couple, you will be able to find like other people who also read different kinds of books. I do think there is a reason that a lot of the stuff that we're shown is trending content, because it is trending. And sometimes some books are just really popular. And if it's not the kinds of books that you want to read or are interested in, you just have to find other people who have other things to say. I feel like that's kind of the trick. That's the last one we're gonna do though. Like I mentioned, I did get more of these and a lot of them were quite interesting. So I might do a part 2 of this. I would love to know your bookish controversial opinions. If you have any, like leave a comment. Maybe I'll react to that in like a part 2 or something. But it's interesting to discuss. People have a lot of interesting opinions about things. I wonder if I have any like controversial book opinions. You know what? I do think I have one. I think that the Lord of the Rings movies are better than the book. Ooh. Maybe I'm the only one. I have talked to some other people who also feel that way, but I read the book like 12, 13, 14 years ago, so it's been ages. But I just remember there were huge chunks of it that were so boring. There were so many trees. And although, of course, the movies would not exist without the book, and the book is great source material, I don't know if I will ever read the book again, but I really love the movies, so I just kind of prefer them. I don't know if this is controversial or not. I'm sure some Lord of the Ring fans of the book like really disagree with me. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, even though it was a little bit different. It was a lot of fun for me to make, and if anyone has any comments and you disagree with them, be nice to each other. It's okay to have different opinions. It's not that deep. But yeah, as always, thank you for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you soon. Bye!